right, checkpoint 9. Okay, so for this checkpoint, on this first problem here, it says, what is 40% of 80? So I'm going to rewrite that over here. Okay, so when I look at this table here, right, whenever it says what am I supposed to put? So wherever in my word problem it says what do I put in place of what? What math operation? When I look at this table, whenever I see the word what do I put in place of it? An X, right? It tells me I should put an X. So where this what is, I'm going to put an X. What about equals? Or sorry, what about where is? Is my next word. What math operation does that tell me to put? Equal sign. Now here I have a percent, right? And when I have a percent, it tells me I need to do what with my percent? What do I have to do with it? My percent, I need to change it. I can't leave it as a percent. I need to change it to a decimal. Perfect. So 40% as a decimal is 0.4. And then my next word is of. Of in my problem tells me to do what math operation? Multiply. So I'm going to multiply this by 80. So for this first problem here, all we are doing is taking 0.4 and multiplying it by 80. Which gives me 32. Which means that 32 is my answer. So what I would do is I would recommend going back to that video for the quiz, that lesson 9 video, and writing this table down somewhere because I use this table all the time when I'm solving these. The next question is similar, but just with different numbers, right? What is 70% of 90? So we're going to do the same thing, but with different numbers. So I'm going to have x is equal to 70% as a decimal is 0.7 times 90. So I'm doing 0.7 times 90, which gives me 63. So this answer is going to be 63. So the biggest thing you have to remember when you're doing these problems is you have to remember to change your percent to a decimal. Okay, so change your percent to a decimal. All right, number 3, what is 40% of 70? So for this problem, what would you type into your calculator to solve number 3? What is 40% of 70? 'Jocelyn says 0.4 times 70. You are correct. That's 100% perfect. So 0.4 times 70. And when you multiply those, you should get 28. Perfect. So that answer would be 28. All right, next one. What is 80% of 50? So what are you typing into your calculator for this next one? What is 80% of 50? .8 times 50, perfect. And when you do 0.8 times 50, what number do you get? 40, perfect. All right, before I go on to the next one, Before I go on to the next one, do any of you guys have questions on those or what we did to get the answers for those ones? Okay. All right, number 5 says 55% of the 880 students at Julian's school are male. How many male students are in Julian's school? Okay, so 55% of is a key that we're going to be doing what type of math here? Of, whenever I see the word of, it tells me I should be doing multiplication. Perfect. So if I know the percent is 55, and I'm taking 55% of 880 students, again, for this one, I'm just going to be multiplying. So of is my multiplication. What is that 55% as a decimal? 0.55. Perfect. Don't forget the extra 5. That makes a difference. So 0.55. So when I multiply those two together, I get 484. All right, next one says, what percent of 50 is 35? So this one's a little bit different because now instead of given a percent, I have to find it. But I'm going to solve this one and break it down the same way I did the first problem we did. So what percent of 50 is 35? So if I pull up this from that PowerPoint that I have, the first two words of my sentence here are what percent, right? It says what percent. And wherever there is a what, I'm going to put a variable. So my percent here is going to be represented by my variable, x. Of tells me I need to multiply, right? So wherever of is right here, I'm multiplying. 50 is just a number, so I'm going to keep 50 there. Is my next word. Is tells me I need to put an equal sign, and 35. So here, this is just a regular equation now. I have x times 50 equals 35. So to solve for x, I need to do some inverse operations. So I need to undo this multiplication. The opposite of multiplication would be division. Perfect. So I'm going to divide both sides by what number? Close. So remember, my goal here is to get x by itself. So the number that is next to my x, which is this 50, that's the one I'm trying to get rid of. So since I'm trying to get rid of this 50 to get x by itself, I'm going to divide both sides by 50. Because when I do that, these two 50s are going to cancel, and I'm left with just x. And then let's go. There it is. So for here, this is where I do that division. So I'm going to do 35 divided by 50, which tells me it is 0.7. But 0.7 is not a percent, right? I'm not done yet. To take this decimal and make it into a percentage, I need to multiply it by 100. So 0.7 times 100 gives me 70%. So 70%. All right, that one was a little bit more tricky. So do we have questions on that one, or are we okay? Hi, Maria. Thanks for joining us. Right now we're going over checkpoint 9. All right, next question says the 20 member of the 20 members of a family have various blood types. One of them has blood type O negative. Which of the following calculations correctly determines the percentage of family members that have O negative? Select the answer that is completely correct. Okay, let's see. So it says that there's 20 total family members, right, 20 total members, only one of them is type negative. So there's one type O out of 20 total members. And I want to know which one correctly determines the percentage of finding a family member that has a O negative blood type. So this is going back to setting up our equation. Sorry. Sorry, my throat was like, it was being weird. So this is going back to what I talked about in my video about part over whole equals percent over 100. So part over whole equals percent over 100. And I don't know what my percent is, so that's where I'm putting an X, right? So the part here is that one person who has blood type of O negative, and the whole is the total number of family members. I wish I didn't write this because now I have to erase this in a very awkward way. I'm going to rewrite it real quick. Whoops. Okay. So I have the 1 over 20 and that's equal to this 100 over X. Okay. So it looks like when I look at all my equations that I have for my proportion, it looks like these two equations at the bottom are incorrect because the proportions are not written correctly. So now we're between these two options, and it looks like we just have to figure out what B actually is, or what our variable is. So this is where we're going to do cross multiplication, right? So I'm going to multiply diagonally. So 1 times 100 is just 100. And then I'm going to do X times 20, which is 20X. Now, I need to get rid of this 20 next to my X to get X by itself. So the opposite of multiplying by 20 is dividing by 20. So that's going to go away. And 100 divided by 20 is 5, which means that 5% of the family members will have a blood type of O negative. So solving for B, 5% of the family members will have an O negative blood type. All right. Number 8. Number 8 says that Marcus rides his bike in a race with 160 competitors. When he finishes the race, he was ahead of 136 competitors. Which statement correctly calculates P, the percentage of Marcus's competitors, or the percentage of competitors Marcus finished ahead of? So here again, we're going to use part over whole equals my percentage over 100. So when you read these two numbers here, your whole is kind of like your total, and your part is usually going to be the smaller number. So when I write my first ratio on this side, talking about my part and whole, which number from the problem goes on top and which one goes on bottom? When you look at this problem here. Oops, sorry. So what would be the part and what's the whole? Remember, the part is a smaller piece, and a whole is another way you can kind of think of the whole as like your total. So Marcus is in a bike race with 160 competitors,
And then he was ahead of 136 of those 160. So what would be my first ratio? I'd have what number over what number? (136 over 60, perfect. Over 160, sorry. Now this 100 on the bottom, this right here, this is always going to be in this spot. This 100 will never move, regardless of what information you're given in your problem. Now I don't know what the percentage is, so I'm going to put an X. So when I look at my answer choices, this equation is incorrect, and this equation is incorrect. So I'm left between these two, and now my job is to figure out what is the actual percentage. So to solve, to see if it's 85 or 11.8. So to do that, we're going to multiply again diagonally. So I have 160 times x, and then do this side. So 136 times 100, which is just with 2 zeros, so 1360. Then we need to solve for x. So opposite of multiplying by 160 is going to be dividing by 160. And when you do 13,600 divided by 160, you will get 85%. Which means that he finished 85% ahead of all of the other competitors, which is pretty good. All right, we okay to go on to the next one? All right, here's our next one. Oh, this is the first two-parter. All right, consider the following proportion: 18 over 30 equals x over 100. Which of the following situations could describe could the proportion describe? 13, whoops, nope, 18. I'll just try again. This is going to be 18 over 30 equals x over 100. So this 18 and then this 30, is this 18 a percentage? Does this 18 represent a percentage? Think about where it's located in our proportion. Remember, this is part over whole equals percent over 100. So could that 18 represent a percentage? Is that 18 saying it's 18%? So when you look at this ratio, this proportion up top is filling out all the places in this proportion in the bottom here. So this 18 is on the top left. So what word is also on the top left? I've circled it in red. It's the part, right? Which means that this 18 represents the part. So knowing that, this 30 would represent the what? The whole. Perfect. And what is my unknown? What is my x? What don't I know here? My x is my percent. Perfect. So I don't know what my percent is. So when I read through these answer choices, I'm looking for a few things. I want to have something where I don't know what the percentage is, because that's where my variable is. I want 30 to be my whole or my total, and I want 18 to be the small part of it. So if I read through all these possible answer choices, all of these first three here say 18%, right? So since they all say 18%, that means that none of those answer choices could be correct because I don't know what my percentage is. So it should be this bottom one down here where it says a basketball team wants to find out what percentage of their games their opponents have won. And then part B is asking us just to solve the proportion. So that's just doing our cross multiplication. Do this and figuring out what we get when we do that. So I have 30 times x. Then I have 18 times 100, which is 1800. And let's divide both sides by 30. So x is going to be 60. So 60% of their games, see, did they win? Yes. They won 60% of their games for part B. All right. Next one here says a bank approved 27 loan applications out of 150 applications in the month of September. What percentage of the loan applications were approved? So this is again a part over whole. That is equal to my percent over 100. So what is my first ratio here? This part over whole, what would be the ratio that I want to write with the numbers that I have on this problem from number 10, where it says that 27 loan applications were approved out of 150. Perfect. So 27 out of 150, because 150 is the total, so that goes on bottom. This 100 will always stay here, and I don't know what my percent is, so I'll put an x. Then we can cross multiply. So 150x is equal to 2,700. Divide both sides by 150 to get x by itself. And x is going to equal 18, which means that 18% of all applications in September were approved. So 18, yes, exactly. Don't put the percentage sign though, just put the number 18. All right, number 11. So citizens in Jarua City were surveyed about a proposed tax increase. 360 of citizens approved the tax increase. This represents 90% of the citizens surveyed. The total number of citizens surveyed can be calculated using the equation blank. And then we are asked to figure out how many total citizens there are. Yeah. So for this one, part over whole equals percent over 100. So this one's a little bit different because I know what my percent is, right? My percent is 90. So I'm going to have 90 over 100 because I know my percent. Now, the tricky part on this one is figuring out if 360 is the part, meaning a part of the population, or if 360 is whole, meaning that's the total number of people that live in this city. So let's reread this carefully. It says that 360 citizens approve the tax increase, and this represents 90% of the total citizens. So do you guys think this 360 is the part, or do you think it's the whole? So read it carefully. 360 citizens represent 90% of the total citizens. So 90% is not 100, right? 100 would mean everyone. So since it's 360 of this 90%, it's the part. So 360 is going to be my part. That means I don't know how many total citizens there are. So I'm going to put X on the bottom here. So if I look at these equations, I want my X to be underneath 360, which means it has to be this top one here. And 90 is over 100. On this one, they have it flipped. Ours is in a different order, but it's okay because what's on both sides of the equal sign are still the same. All right, so then next step is cross multiplying to solve this. So let's multiply 90 times X. And then 360 times 100. We could divide both sides by 90. And let's see, these will cancel. And then that is 400. So that means that there are 400 total citizens. All right, number 12. It says if 45% of a number is 54, what is 65% of the number? So on this one here, this is kind of like two problems in one. So this comma that's after this 54 will separate this problem in two. So look at this as two separate problems and do the left side first. Okay, so I'm going to write this over here. If 45% of a number is 54. So let's leave it like that. If I pull up my little chart, right, that tells me what each of these words represent when I change it to a math operation, I start with 45%. That needs to be changed to a decimal, right? 45% needs to go to a decimal. So that's 0.45. The next word that I have here is of, right? Of tells me I need to multiply. So I'm multiplying. And a number. Now, I don't know what this number is, right? So since I don't know what this number is, I'm going to put an X because I don't know. Is tells me I need to put an equal sign, right? And 54 is just a number. I can leave that as 54. So now let's solve this for X. The opposite of multiplying by 0.45 is going to be dividing. So this will go away, and X is going to be, so 54 divided by 0.45, 120. So I know that whatever number, this first number in my problem, this of a number, that number is 120. Okay. So that number is 120. So now let's do that last part where it says what is 65% of the number. The number was what? What did we just find out that number was? Hopefully you guys remember. 120, perfect, of 120, because I know that that number that we just solved for was 120. So now this looks like those problems we did at the beginning where all we had to do, because what is X? Is my equal sign, 65% as a decimal, and I'm multiplying by 120. So once I figure out what that number is, all I need to do is multiply those. So close. Dawson, don't forget to change the percent to a decimal. You have to change your percent to a decimal, otherwise you'll get a very large wrong number. So don't forget to change it to a decimal. That's super important. You were very close though, yes. So that's exactly what you want to type in. So whenever you multiply these,
you should get 78. All right, the next one is similar. Oh, all the rest of these are like that. The next one for 13 says, if 75% of a number is 24, what is 50% of the number? So again, we're going to only focus on this first part here. So we're going to only focus on this first part to figure out what that number is. So I have if 75% of a number is 24. All right, so 75% is first. I need to change that to a decimal. Of tells me I'm multiplying. I don't know what my number is. Is tells me that's my equal sign, and then I have 24. So I'm going to divide both sides by 0.75. And then this is going to tell me what my number is. So 24 divided by 0.75 tells me that my number is 32. The next portion of that question is asking me what is 50% of that number. So I'm going to take 50%, change it to a decimal, so 0.5, multiply it by 32, get 16. So perfect, so 16. All right, then we have two more. This next one says, if 20% of a number is 15, what is the original number? So this one's actually easier than the two we just did before, because this one is just asking us to do this first step. So this step on the bottom, we're not doing. So let's see, we have if 20% of a number is 15. So if 20%, so I have 0.2 times x is equal to 15. Divide both sides by 0.2. Oops. Which tells me that x is 75. Yeah, the 2-in-1 questions can be tricky. The 2-in-1 questions can be tricky. Just remember, you always do this, treat this comma in the question as like a divider. So this comma tells you need to do this side first, then take that answer and use it with this second part. And then with these ones, again, using this table that I gave you guys in that lesson, I would 10 out of 10 write this somewhere or have it somewhere for you to use, because I use this all the time because I forget sometimes. So the last one, if 25% of a number is 12.5, what is the original number? So what would be the equation that you write for that one? I'll put this up for you guys in case you need it. So if 25% of a number is 12.5, what is the original number? Zero point 0.25x is equal to 12.5. Perfect. So 0.25x is equal to 12.5. Then remember, I'm trying to get rid of this 0.25 here, so I need to divide both sides by 0.25. Exactly. And then when you divide it, you should get the 50. Perfect.